All right, hello, welcome to another week, everyone, where we're still going to be talking about Sharks hockey, but I want to focus on the free agency signing because the 2020 draft is coming up, and Doug Wilson still needs to make some big signing these offseason and still trying to figure out who they're going to keep and who are they going to have to get rid of. And currently, right now, Sharks have 10 forwards, 5 defensemen, and a goaltender that have a contract and have made some sort of impact this season, even if it's only 1 or 2 different games. And in translation, that's only about 3 lines worth of forwards and defensemen. And upon that, 4 forwards and 1 defenseman made their debut this last season, so it's not looking good. And Wilson hasn't had a really good track record of drafting good players these last 5 or 6 years. So it's not like we're going to have some good up and coming players that are going to easily replace some of these veterans. And good news for Sharks is that they do have a little bit more cap space to work with this year, and that they don't have to worry about Brandon Dillon's $1.6 million contract that they had to keep over during that Washington Capitals trade. But they also do not have to worry about Paul Martin's $1.4 million contract either, so that they do have a little bit more money to work with. According to Cap Friendly, Sharks have about $14 million to work with, which is about 7 Joe Thornton contracts or 1 Erik Karlsson contract and about half your casual fan base. And yes, we can have that whole discussion about who should be paid what and how much later on in a completely different video, but I really just want to focus on who these free agents are going to be for the Sharks this coming year, and maybe should they take a shot in re-signing them, or is it time just to say goodbye to them? And I'm going to start off by saying that I think Sharks may need to sign Tim Heed back to a contract. He will be for cheap. His contract this last year was $900,000, and he did sign just a 3-month contract with the Switzerland team. So it just might be just to play for this little bit, and then once NHL returns, he will be looking to come back to the NHL. But 29 years old, going to be 30 in January, did put up quite a bit of assists. I think about 29 assists in 105 games as a defenseman. He might be someone to come back, a little bit bigger of a guy, and again, he's going to be for cheap, so it's not like he's going to be taking that big of a salary cap hit that the Sharks desperately need, especially with how big contract players that they do have currently, and maybe in the future he will be looking to be a cheap player for the Sharks. Now let's talk about the defensive situation, because the 3 guys that are up for contract this year are Brandon Davidson, Jacob Middleton, and Dalton Prout. So let's first talk about Brandon Davidson, who is 29 years old this year. He was drafted by the Oilers in 2010 in the 6th round, and then just kind of from there, he didn't really get a big enough shot until 2014 season. And then after the Oilers, he's kind of bounced around to a couple different teams. Montreal Canadiens is one, Islanders, Flames, and I think Blackhawks were in the mix as well. And then he finally eventually ended up in the San Jose Sharks. And in total, it's 174 games in the NHL. Not that much production, about 9 goals and 14 assists in total. So it's going to be really hard to sign him to a league contract, even if it's minimum league of 700,000. So he may go back to the AHL, get a little bit more work. But again, at 29 years old, it's starting to really start to be a struggle for an NHL career. So it might be time that we're going to be saying goodbye to him, and he may not be back in the NHL. He may go back down to the AHL. And another guy that might be up for a really cheap contract for the defenseman for the Sharks, Dalton Prout. He has played quite a bit more games than Davidson, even though he was drafted in the exact same year in the actual same round, but with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But in his 264 games, put up 31 assists, which is quite a bit, but not that much playoff potential, not that much power play. I think only 1 assist on a power play in his entire career. So it's not like someone that the Sharks are going to be really looking for. And again, 29, 30 years old, it's starting to look really hard. Only 2 games with the Sharks, so he hasn't really figured out, or hasn't had enough time to really figure out where he fits with the Sharks lineup. And the final defenseman that was on the active roster, Jacob Middleton, a 24-year-old guy, drafted last overall in the 2014 draft by the LA Kings. Again, young guy, only has played a handful of games with the Sharks, about 24 games. Did demonstrate quite a bit with the OHL Ottawa 67s, so it was really why the Sharks picked him up. And after signing with the Sharks, he did have a really good season with the Barracuda, having 22 assists across 67 games. And honestly, it's for cheap. He was doing really well, which was the most points he had that first year among the Barracuda defensemen, as well as most assists among Barracuda defensemen his first year. So there's a lot of potential of him being a pretty good third liner defenseman. And that is all the Sharks defensemen that had some sort of impact last season that are up for free agencies. To be honest, I really do expect Tim Heed to come back. I also do expect Jacob Middleton to come back because, I mean, Heed, just due to his size and physicality, and Middleton just more due to his age. And he did really good with the Barracuda, so maybe just a little bit more practice for him with the Barracuda at the beginning of next season, maybe just a third of the way through the season, bring him back up to the NHL and just give him the rest of the games. Those two guys can really do a lot on the third line, I think. Maybe not together, maybe you have to split them up, but I think they do deserve another shot with the Sharks. Bringing them back up. So maybe not Prow and Davidson, but I would expect to see Tim Heed and Jacob Middleton back. But let me know, who do you think would be a defenseman to bring back out of these three? And I actually will mention this. In the total of the free agency in the league, we actually might see Justin Braun back. His contract is up with the Philadelphia Flyers. It may not be for cheap, but maybe for $2 million, he may want to come back to San Jose and again get that physicality back among the Sharks defensemen. And I don't think he'll be back, but maybe Brendan Dillon will be back because his contract is technically up with the Washington Capitals, but that's definitely not going to be for cheap. And maybe Capitals may re-sign him, but I don't know. He is up for contract, and maybe we get Braun and Brandon Dillon back. It would be very interesting to see those two guys back in San Jose Sharks uniform. If Brandon Dillon's back, Sharks definitely won that trade by getting the 7th round pick out of the Washington Capitals this year. So it'll be interesting. I don't know. There's some interesting guys up for free agency this year, but I'm expecting Braun to be back in San Jose Sharks uniform, to be honest. So let me know, who do you want? Who do you want back out of Braun and Brandon Dillon? Who do you want back in Sharks uniform? And another guy that Sharks should also look out for is Anthony Greco, who technically his contract is up at the season. He only had a handful of games with the Sharks this year. He was in that trade with Barclay Goodrow. That Barclay Goodrow went over to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Sharks got a first round pick this year from the Tampa Bay Lightning, along with Anthony Greco. His contract is going to be up for cheap. He's going to be a very young guy as well. He did have quite a bit of points. I did talk about that in the trade video that I did last week. There's going to be a link in the description and in the card up top, but he's going to be another good guy to see. He's going to be a guy that will probably have a little bit more production once he gets that ice time and once he figures out how he fits within the Sharks system as well. And I just want to get this one out of the way because it's just one guy that we'll have to talk about. But let's talk about the goaltender situation, which obviously is Aaron Dell up for contract. It's not going to be for cheap. His contract this last season was $1.9 million. And yes, he had some really good backup goaltender numbers with about just over 3 goals against with 3.01 goals against average and a 90.7 save percentage. So it's a really good backup goaltender numbers. It's just, I know a lot of Sharks fans don't like Jones. I get it. I understand he did not have a lot of good last season, and even the season before was a little bit questionable as well. But Aaron Dell's contract may not be cheap enough for the Sharks, unfortunately. They may need to do a little bit of a cap dump in order to get Aaron Dell, along with these other signings that they have to do as well. But I don't know. I don't know what he's going to be looking for in terms of a contract number. So we may not see Aaron Dell back next year. It may unfortunately be we have to sign a different goaltender. And honestly, speaking of free agency goaltenders, Thomas Greiss might be back with the San Jose Sharks. He is not probably going to be looking to re-sign with the New York Islanders just because they're probably going to stick with Varlamov. And I honestly think that Thomas Greiss might be back with the Sharks next year, depending on his contract, depending on how much he's going to be asking for. and he actually may steal that starter role from Martin Jones. He did show quite a bit with the New York Islanders, especially this postseason, definitely helping out in those game sevens and finishing off whoever the Islanders were playing against, and sealed and clinched that they were going to go on to the next round. So Thomas Greiss is going to be looking to be signing with the team, and maybe he might be back in Sharks uniform, which honestly, I do like Greiss a little bit more than Dell. I think Greiss has a lot more experience than Dell. And Greiss has been in more of that starter role as well with the New York Islanders. He was kind of back and forth. I know Islanders kind of did the split 50-50 with the seasons with Thomas Greiss, but Greiss does have that starter potential over Dell. So I think it might be really good to sign Thomas Greiss, and maybe we'll have to unfortunately let go of Dell. But just depending on how much each of the players are asking, I would be happy to have both back. And actually, let's just talk about the goalies a little bit, who's going to be up for free agency this year. Probably won't sign with the Sharks, but maybe. I don't know. For the Flames, Cam Talbot is up for free agency. They're probably going to be going for Riddish as their main goaltender. And also from the Flyers, Brian Elliott. Yes, these two goalies are older, but Brian Elliott is probably not going to sign with the Flyers, to be honest, unless if he goes for cheap and just does the coaching for Carter Hart. But that would be interesting to see Brian Elliott or Cam Talbot in Sharks uniform. A hell of a lot more consistent than Martin Jones. And also a third one, Jakob Markstrom. I'm going to be bold with this. I don't think Markstrom's going to be re-signing with the Vancouver Canucks just because of Danko Thatcher's performance this playoff. So I mean, if Markstrom does re-sign with the Canucks, it may not be for long, because Thatcher Demko, he did amazing this playoff season. So it'll be interesting to see what goalies are going to be up and who they go for afterwards. And now for the dreaded forward situation. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of just kind of like the easier one just early. Stefan Nazin probably won't make the lineup for the Sharks. He didn't have that great of a season last year between the Sharks and the Penguins. Just a handful of points, to be honest, between the two teams, and just has shy of 200 NHL games. I think it's actually at 199 right now. Probably won't re-sign with the Sharks. I mean, maybe just to do like the AHL Barracuda signing and maybe just bring him up in case we have injuries. But Nazin may not be back in Sharks uniform, at least for full time. Probably the harder one to talk about is Melker Karlsson, because he did not have that good of a year this last year. He only had 6 goals and 6 assists. And that's kind of his average. It's not that much better. 10 goals, 9 assists is his average between across the Sharks. And yes, he's going to be available for cheap, but to say that he's $700,000 worth of an NHL player, it's not looking like he'll be back. Again, it might be more sign him to the Barracuda deal, but he probably won't be back in Sharks uniform, unfortunately, at least full time like he has been before. So it might be time to say goodbye to Melker Karlsson, unfortunately, for Sharks, at least for full time. Maybe he'll be back again for the Barracuda deals, but it's been a little rough for Melker Karlsson, and he just hasn't found his footing even on the fourth line to just really take off and show a lot of that NHL potential. So I'm gonna start saying goodbye to Melker Karlsson. I'm sorry you did. Thank you for being a Shark uniform, but it's gonna be hard to see if you're gonna re-sign for full-time Sharks, unfortunately. A guy that I'm gonna question whether or not he's gonna be re-signed, more due to the fact that Sharks do need like true right wingers. Antti Suomelo could be a guy for cheap. 15 points across 47 games. Went undrafted in 2015. Maybe a league minimum for him, maybe like 800, 900,000 signing for his contract, but Sharks definitely need in more of that forward situation. Definitely need a little bit more of that true right winger, which Suomelo has that left-handed shot. So maybe if you can somehow convert him to that true right wing role, but I don't know. It's going to be someone for cheap, 26 years old. maybe just give him a little bit more experience. Maybe he'll just all of a sudden take off. But again, he's going to be kind of back and forth on whether or not he's going to be re-signed or not. And a player that will definitely be back in Sharks uniform next year, I'm going to say right now, he is definitely going to be re-signed by the Sharks. Kevin Labanc, 24 years old. He had 14 goals and 19 assists last year. The season before, he had 56 points, and the season before that, he has 40 points. So he's definitely on the upswing. Obviously, when Sharks are having a good season, he obviously will be contributing quite a bit. So I can see him really signing well with the Sharks, maybe to a 4 or 5 year deal. But he is definitely going to be a guy that will be back in Sharks uniform. And finally, I'm just going to say this for the third time in his career. This will be Joe Thornton's last season with the San Jose Sharks. Again, he has a lot of experience. He can really coach some of these players really well, and fit more into that veteran role. Maybe bump him down to the third or fourth line just to really show the young guys, like, hey, you need to be in this position because, and again, we know Thornton's stats, especially those assists. I know we love to yell at him when he passes the puck on an empty net situation, but he does have a lot of assists for a reason. He knows where guys are open. So he can really coach these young guys, saying like, hey, like if these players are in this situation, you need to be either pinching in right here or going out there, and you'll be open and I will find you and pass to you, and really start to coach these players on their positioning and how to look for these plays to pass around the puck to. So I'm going to say for the third time in his career, this will probably be Joe Thornton's last season with the San Jose Sharks and the last season in the NHL. But I will say this, if Thornton does re-sign with the Sharks, I think there's going to be a little bit of bitterness between it, especially with him wanting to sign or be traded over to the Dallas Stars this last season with the San Jose Sharks. But I don't know what Sharks we're going to get back from him, so it may not have been really beneficial for the trade, but it's going to be interesting to see if Thornton does re-sign with the Sharks, because it's definitely not going to be a happy signing. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of words exchanged in that handshake between Thornton and Wilson, but who knows. But I do expect Thornton back for one season again. The dude has over 1,500 career assists and is on the all-time list for assists. And I will mention this too, he has 420 goals. Nice. And that's it, at least for the active roster for the Sharks players. And before I sign off, I actually do want to throw out some names of just interesting players that are up for free agency this year. Probably out of Sharks cap space range completely, but I don't know. That might be interesting to see if Sharks can maybe snag one of these guys for cheap. But I do want to throw out some really interesting names that are going to be up for free agency this year. First one, Alex Pietrangelo. He doesn't look like he's going to be re-signing with the Blues. He's going to be probably testing the waters out for free agency. But maybe if he doesn't get a good enough offer from another team, he will probably be back with the Blues. I can't imagine him not playing hockey next year, but he's going to be testing out the free agency waters next year, so it'll be really interesting to see who he signs with. Another guy that I'm not sure about, there's a lot of talk about this, and I've seen a lot of Sharks fans seeing this more in terms of a trade, but he is up for free agency this year. Tyler Toffoli. I don't know how I feel about it overall, just because I know him in his Kings uniform. I know he's a part of the Vancouver Canucks, but that was just this last season. But just to have that underneath him, it's just, it kind of hurts a little bit. But again, a really good defenseman that Sharks would absolutely love to have. But again, it might be out of Sharks cap salary range a little bit, but I don't know. Like I said, it would be nice to have Toffoli on the Sharks, but deep down inside, I'm just going to know that you're a king. You are a king, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. But again, I would definitely be really happy with Toffoli on the Sharks. And one final guy, again, I'm kind of talking about former Sharks that are up for free agency this year. I know I talked about Thomas Greiss, Justin Braun, and Brandon Dillon, but another guy that's actually up for free agency this year, Chris Tierney. He did put up 36 points last season with the Ottawa Senators, but he's up for free agency. And again, $3 million, it may be worth a shot to go after him. So we may have a lot of former Sharks coming back to the San Jose. And honestly, some pretty good guys, a lot of fan favorites, guys that were either heavy hitters or guys that were producing quite a bit on the second or third lines, especially if they're forwards. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see who the Sharks re-sign this year. And that's where I'm going to sign off for today. Let me know down below, who do you think Sharks should re-sign for their active players that they had this last season, and look at the list of free agencies that are going to be coming up this year. Who should Sharks probably go after this coming season? It would be very interesting to see if they can get to Foley and maybe even get some of these former Sharks back that were playing with them in before. So if you like this video, please hit like. Please also hit subscribe. Please leave a comment down below if you like this kind of content as well. And until next time, please stay safe and please stay healthy.